Off the top, joining us in studio, NDP Esquimalt-Juan de Fuca candidate Randall Garrison. Nice to have you back.
Morning, Murray.
It has been a very active campaign, and I know here locally, all the candidates are really getting out there. Talk about the challenges, because you've done this before. What's different in 2011 as opposed to 2006?
Well, we're often running in Esquimalt-Juan de Fuca, and one of the big challenges is lots of new neighborhoods, lots of people who haven't voted in this riding before, lots of people aren't on the voters list. And so we're trying to contact as many people at the doorstep and on the phones, get them the information they need, and help them find out where and how to vote.
And this is something all the candidates will be facing.
It's a challenge everybody's facing, but it's a particularly big challenge in Esquimalt-Juan de Fuca because of the new development that's taken place, lots of new tracts of housing where nobody's really on the voters list.
And it's a very large riding to begin with, both in terms of numbers and geography as well.
Right, a great stretch from Esquimalt out to Port Renfrew. I was out in Port Renfrew last Saturday talking to people out there. They get one TV station. The phones sometimes don't work. Real problems with jobs and a slowdown in the economy out there. But lots of local initiatives that we saw, people trying to get some alternatives going. And I look forward to working with people on that in the future.
So how do you, account for such a discrepancy of socioeconomic opportunities or I guess circumstances? Because if you take a look at Port Renfrew, and again, this is not candidate dependent, this is something everyone would face. Take a look at Port Renfrew, and then you take a look at Langford. I mean, you're dealing with two totally different worlds. Two
totally different worlds, but I think the federal government's role for both of those is the same, and that's to get on board with the local initiatives and help people in their daily lives, reduce some of the costs people face, and also support initiatives like we saw out in Port Renfrew, where they're getting together a new visitor information center, and some of the volunteer efforts like firefighting in Port Renfrew, the kind of things that people have done on their own initiative, and the federal government needs to get behind those.
So let me ask you, as a candidate, what message do you try and sell or convey? Is it the person or the party? Do you approach as, hi, I'm Randall Garrison, or do you say, hi, I'm with the NDP?
Well, I always start with, hi, I'm Randall Garrison, because I think people are used to the fact that I've done this kind of work and representing them and working with people all my life. I do it now as a counselor. I've done it internationally, working on international peacekeeping missions, and I really enjoy talking to people and finding out their concerns and then trying to find the practical solutions.
So what are you hearing on the doorstep? What's of issue? Is it the jobs? Is it healthcare? Is it education?
Certainly affordability. We've come through the recession, and maybe we're on the other side of it. I certainly hope so. But for most families, life's gotten harder. So we may be at the end of the recession, but everything costs a bit more. Salaries haven't kept up with that. Jobs and job creation hasn't kept up with that. And so people are worried about the future. And again, there's some things the federal government could do to help out in those areas. And I guess people are feeling like they've been left behind.
So what's the recipe? How do you find that balance?
Well, I think the recipe's in the NDP platform that just came out. I'm quite happy with it. It talks about giving your family a break, and it's full of practical measures to get people the help they need. Healthcare. Let's have more doctors and nurses. We got tons of people in my riding who don't have a family doctor. And so if the federal government can help train those doctors and get more people out in the field, like nurses and other healthcare professionals, then that's going to help people get back to work. It's going to help people who are giving care either for children or their elderly parents. And we've also talked in healthcare about expanding the Canada Health Act so that it includes home care and it includes long-term care beds.
It's interesting you're bringing up healthcare because a lot of people will say, well, look, this is a provincial matter. I mean, I don't know why you're trying to get involved in this anyway, but it is a shared responsibility. So when we hear about, and the legislation clearly is a federal responsibility, when we hear talk about this, people don't necessarily equate that there is a role for Ottawa to play.
Well, we've got negotiations coming up for a new Canada Healthcare Agreement, and what we've said is we want to put commitments along with the money. So if the provinces get the federal transfers, they need to spend that money on home care, they need to spend that money on long-term care, and they need to spend that money on more doctors and nurses. So the Conservatives have kind of let the provinces run all over the map and do whatever they like. We're committed to that single-payer universal public health care, and we can put some conditions on that funding that goes out to the provinces and increase the funding by about 6% a year.
Childcare.
Childcare, our platform calls for the federal government to get involved in providing new spaces, about 25,000 spaces in the first year. And certainly in Esquimalt-Juan de Fuca, we've got just some absurd situations for families. A real crisis, I'd say, in childcare in Souk, where we end up with families who have to drive one kid to Langford and another one to Esquimalt to drop them off before they can even start to head for work. And so that $100 a month that people get doesn't create the spaces. Wouldn't pay for them, but it doesn't create them. And so we want the federal government to get involved in help stimulating the creation of new childcare spaces in this riding.
So how would that unfold? What would that look like? Because that can be very labor intensive and very cost intensive as well.
Well, I guess labor intensive is a good thing because we do need to create more jobs. And I think two ways you can do it. One is through creation of more public spaces, and two is providing some capital support for those private operators, private nonprofit operators, to get the spaces up and running.
Pensions. I know this has been a huge issue. I don't know if, Randall, if an election campaign is the best place to unveil this kind of concept, what you'd like to see in terms of an end user and what they receive, or the taxpayer. But talk about the platform, because I did read with interest.
Well, I think when I talk to a lot of young people at the door and I say pensions, they think seniors. Yeah. But what we're really talking about is two things in pensions. One, we're talking about the neglect over the last 20 years by the Liberals and the Conservatives of the Canada Pension Plan, and its benefits have fallen behind, so that if you're dependent on the Canada Pension Plan, you just don't have enough to live on. And so we're talking about now an immediate lift to the guaranteed income supplement that will lift all seniors out of poverty. I think it's fair, I think it's what they deserve, and I think it's something we can do right now. But the other part that people don't connect with is if we make some small increases in the premiums of the Canada Pension Plan now, when those people retire, we can double their benefits for them, and they won't end up in that situation seniors are in now.
So talk about that, because people are a little sensitive when it comes to payroll taxes. They're a little sensitive when they hear talk of, hey, it's just a little increase. Because we've seen a little increase, and after a while it gets pricey. What does it look like?
Well, it looks like something between $3 and $4 a week for a full-time employed person would help double those benefits over the long run. And it is, rather than a tax, it's an enforced savings. And the way it works is the miracle of compound interest. If you start putting that away in the fund now, by the time those people retire, it will pay for itself.
So annualized, that's about $150, $200 a year.
It could be, yes.
All right. We're facing some regularly scheduled increases. In fact, I can't think of the last time where we didn't see hikes in CPP or EI.
Well, two separate things, CPP and EI, yes, and there's no doubt that in terms of job creation, you've got to be careful what you load on to employment, no doubt about that. But I think in the long run, it's really important that we double those benefits. Yeah, that'll save us so much money at the other end. Down the road, we won't be in the situation of having to pay supplements to people to keep them out of poverty when they're seniors. Okay,
so from an individual's perspective, you could make that argument. Keep in mind, for every contribution an employee makes, the employer has to make that as well. And there is an impact, especially on small businesses, for each and every employee.
And that's why in our platform we've called for a cut in the small business income tax rate from 11% to 9%. So we have taken into account small businesses, and we'll give them a tax break. The other thing we've said we'll do is we'll create a tax credit for job creation for small business, so that if people create a new job, we'll give them a $4,500 tax credit for doing that if they maintain the job over the year.
Why is small business
that's the main
focus?
That's the main job creator in our economy these days. The days of the big corporate forest industries and the big employers, they've run away. And we're depending on the initiative and the innovation of small business locally to create most of the jobs.
And do you think there's a stronger future on the small business front?
I think there's a great future on the small business front in diversifying our economy here locally, especially expanding our tourism economy, and in the high-tech sector, lots of small, innovative startups, and in the green economy. Huge opportunities for small business in the green economy.
Okay, so let's take a look at that corporate tax rate now. It was 18, it's gone down to 16.5, and Randall, as I understand, it's destined to fall to 15% if all continues. Under your party's platform, that is scheduled to go up to 19.5%?
That's right. I'll just make one little correction.
Sure.
It was 21%.
Correct.
And both the Liberals and Conservatives would like people to forget that they'd already given big corporate tax cuts. We're already well below the rates in the United States. And so in our platform, the way we're going to pay for our new initiatives, one of the chief ways is by putting the corporate income tax rate back where it was in 2008. And
right? What impact do you foresee that having? Because there will be an impact.
The Department of Finance actually did a study on looking at corporate income tax reductions, and I don't have that study in front of me, but it was what they concluded was a very small proportion of any of those corporate income tax cuts went to new investment. Most of it was paid out as dividends to shareholders or bonuses to executives. So there is an impact, but it's much smaller than most people would think.
Then why is it often seen as a promotable tool for stimulating growth and economic opportunity? Because quite frankly, it is. If previous governments have said, well, look, let's cut this because this creates jobs, why aren't you all on board?
Well, where's the proof in the pudding? We've had the corporate tax cuts and we haven't had the job increase. So I don't see it. I know it's a great theory, but I don't see it.
Is that the kind of thing that you're hearing more and more talk about a business-centric approach that we've seen in the past 10 or 20 years?
Well, I think it's an ideological approach by the Conservatives. They have a theory about how things work that doesn't always match reality. And, when we headed into this recession, Stephen Harper very stubbornly said, we don't need stimulus spending and we're not going to do it. And it was only when he was faced by the Parliament saying, we have to do something here to get us out of this recession, that he did an about-face. So his theories sometimes run smack dab into reality.
I think he also said it was a buying opportunity as the market started
that was one of his more unfortunate quotes.
But it makes people look and listen. The news this morning, and I'm sure this is going to generate a lot of buzz. It certainly is on social media and newsrooms around the country. An Auditor General's draft has been obtained by the Canadian press saying, look, $50 million was allocated in this way by the Prime Minister, one of the cabinet ministers, and someone from the private sector.
Right. One of the 5 things we're talking about, in addition to doctors and nurses, pensions, job creation, is fixing Ottawa, because something's obviously broken right now. And so we're saying we need a different way of operating in Ottawa. And the traditional old political games, putting friends and insiders first, and that seems to be what's happened in the initial read of what the Auditor General has said, is that money was put in around the G20 for political purposes. A community center built where no leader ever set foot. One center, I think, was more than an hour away from where the meetings were. These were obviously spending public funds for political purposes. And I think that has to stop.
An explanation will be required, as too will it be for that other issue that you bring up about Ottawa and the concept of insiders and rewarding political loyalty. Also, a story came out over the weekend that political staffers, I guess there were some alterations made within the last handful of weeks before the election that would enhance severance pay and also widen the window in terms of salary for those at the executive level or, those reporting directly to the minister. And which begs the questions, if we're supposed to be keeping an eye on our books, then why are more generous severances being pegged for those closest to the upper echelons of the Prime Minister? And why are the salary scales or the salary window, why is that being widened so much? I think people are going to ask questions about that as well.
Well, it's again more of the friends and insiders benefiting in Ottawa instead of doing things for people. It certainly makes
someone wonder what's going on.
Right. This is the same Prime Minister who said that he'd never appoint a senator, right? He was only for elected senators. He's now got the record for the most Senate appointments. 2 of those senators are up on charges for electoral fraud, essentially, in 2006. And those senators are working on the Conservative campaign while being paid by the public dime. So it's a syndrome that runs through Ottawa, and we need to send some people there to stop it.
And I've asked this of a lot of people, those that want to be candidates, those that want to get to Ottawa. When you take a look at the system in Ottawa, if I can use that word, it seems almost incorrigible. It seems as though a trend has been set, a pattern is established, and things don't change.
Well, I guess I'm a little more optimistic than that, in that I see that in the last Parliament, despite the bickering that appears in question period, sometimes parties got together and got things done. Certainly the Climate Change Accountability Act put forward by the NDP passed through the House of Commons, unfortunately killed in the Conservative Senate. But that and other examples, the drug bill to provide cheap HIV and AIDS drugs for Africa, same thing. Got through the House of Commons through cooperation among the parties, killed in the Senate. So I've always been a big advocate of course, killing the Senate itself and saving a lot of money. But I think those examples show that when people of goodwill get together, we can get things done. And so part of what needs to happen is we need to send a different bunch of MPs. More New Democrats in Ottawa will certainly help in that cooperative approach.